You are kneeling in absolute darkness. The air is thick, dense with the smell of damp earth and lamp oil. Your wrists are bound behind your back, but not with rope, with white linen, sacred linen, because even now, as they prepare to bury you alive, they cannot spill your blood. You hear footsteps above, heavy, deliberate, the sound of a bronze grate being dragged across stone. A shaft of light cuts through the blackness and you realise where you are. You're 23 feet below the streets of Rome, in a chamber barely large enough to turn around. There is a small couch, a loaf of bread, a clay lamp with enough oil for maybe 6 hours, a jug of water, a bowl of milk. This is not a dungeon. This is an inventory. Because in approximately 4 hours, when the priests finish their prayers and the crowd disperses, they will seal the shaft above you. They will fill it with earth, and you will become a footnote in the administrative records of the College of Pontiffs, a line item in the ledger of Rome's most sacred murder machine. In the centre of ancient Rome, 6 women held the spiritual fate of an empire in their hands. The Vestal virgins, priestesses of the goddess Vesta, were tasked with keeping the sacred flame burning in the temple of Vesta. If the flame died, Rome would fall. If a Vestal broke her vow of chastity, Rome would be cursed. But here's what your textbooks won't tell you. The punishment for breaking that vow wasn't execution. It was something far more calculated. It was a 700-year bureaucratic procedure designed to kill a woman without technically killing her, to avoid divine retribution for spilling the blood of a sacred person while still satisfying the public's demand for vengeance. They called it damnatio ad terram, condemnation to the earth, but that's sanitized language. What it actually was, a woman sealed in an underground chamber with just enough provisions to prolong her death, buried alive beneath the streets of Rome, while priests chanted prayers above. This is a story that was deliberately erased from popular history, not because it was rare, but because it reveals the machinery of how power weaponizes purity. The Vestal virgins were chosen between the ages of 6 and 10. They served for 30 years, 10 years learning, 10 years serving, 10 years teaching. They lived in the house of the Vestals, a palace on the Forum. They had privileges no other Roman women possessed. They could own property. They could write wills. Their presence could pardon a condemned criminal. But there was one rule that superseded all of these privileges: absolute chastity, not because of morality, because of theology. The Vestal's virginity was understood as a kind of spiritual technology, a power source that kept Rome's divine contract intact. If a Vestal's purity was compromised, it wasn't just a personal sin, it was a systemic failure, a crack in the foundation of Rome itself, and when the system detected a failure, it activated a protocol. The accusation didn't need to be proven, it needed to be plausible. In 114 BCE, 3 Vestals, Aemilia, Licinia and Marcia, were accused of breaking their vows. The evidence was circumstantial. They had been seen speaking too familiarly with certain patrician men. There were rumours, whispers in the Forum, but Rome was in crisis. There had been military defeats, earthquakes, omens, birds flying in the wrong direction, lightning striking the temple. The Senate needed an explanation for why the gods had abandoned them, and so they found one. The Vestals were brought before the College of Pontiffs, a panel of priests who functioned as both judges and administrators. This wasn't a trial in the modern sense. There were no lawyers, no defence. The accused could speak, but only to deny or confess. Aemilia confessed immediately. Historians debate whether she was tortured or simply terrified into submission. Licinia and Marcia denied everything. Didn't matter. The pontiffs voted. The verdict was unanimous. The machinery began to turn. The procession to the Campus Sceleratus, the evil field, was designed to be a spectacle of inverted ritual. Normally, when a Vestal died of natural causes, her funeral was one of the grandest in Rome. Her body was carried through the streets on a bier, draped in white, accompanied by mourners and incense. But a condemned Vestal's final journey was the opposite. She was placed in a covered litter, like a closed coffin, so no one could see her face. The litter was carried through the forum in silence. No music, no mourners, just the rhythmic crunch of sandals on stone. Here's the detail that historians gloss over. The condemned woman was dressed in her full priestly regalia, white robes, a headband woven with wool. She was still, technically, a sacred person, which meant the state could not execute her directly. This is the logic of the machine. Rome needed her dead, but it could not kill her. So it designed a process where she would kill herself, by running out of air, by starvation, by terror, while the state maintained plausible deniability. The Campus Sceleratus was located just outside the Colline Gate near the city walls. It was a small field, unremarkable except for what lay beneath it. The chamber had been constructed specifically for this purpose. It was approximately 8 feet wide, 12 feet long, and 23 feet deep. The walls were stone, the floor was packed earth. There was no ventilation except for the shaft that would soon be sealed. The condemned Vestal was led down a ladder. At the bottom, she found the inventory, a small couch or bench, a loaf of bread, a jug of water, a bowl of milk, a clay lamp with a small reservoir of oil. This is where the cruelty becomes visible. The provisions were not meant for survival. They were meant to create the appearance of mercy. The bread and water gave the illusion that Rome was not killing her, merely confining her. The milk was symbolic. It represented purity, a final gesture of respect for her former status. But the quantities were calculated, enough to last perhaps 2 or 3 days, not enough to matter. Let's talk about what actually happens to a human body in this scenario, because this is where the bureaucratic language fails and the anatomy takes over. In a sealed chamber 23 feet underground, oxygen is finite. An average adult human consumes about 550 litres of oxygen per day. The chamber contained roughly 750 cubic feet of air, about 21,000 litres. Sounds like a lot, except that only 21% of air is oxygen, and the human body can't function when oxygen drops below 19.5%. You have about 36 hours before hypoxia sets in. The symptoms begin gradually: lightheadedness, confusion, a feeling of euphoria as the brain begins to shut down. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your vision narrows. Your body starts to prioritize vital organs, shutting down circulation to your extremities. But here's the worst part. You don't die quickly, because the chamber isn't airtight. There's slow seepage through the earth above, just enough to keep you conscious, just enough to prolong it. The lamp oil runs out first, maybe 6 hours. Then you're in total darkness. You can hear the city above, muffled footsteps, cartwheels, voices. You realise that life is continuing 23 feet above your head, while you suffocate in the dark. The bread becomes impossible to swallow because your mouth is too dry. The water is rationed instinctively, but it doesn't matter. By the second day, you're too weak to move from the couch. And here's what the sources don't mention: the temperature. Underground chambers in Rome average about 55 degrees. Cold enough that hypothermia becomes a factor. Your body starts to shiver uncontrollably, burning through the last of your caloric reserves. After the chamber was sealed, Rome didn't speak the Vestal's name again. Her statue in the House of the Vestals was removed. Her inscriptions were chiselled off the marble. She was administratively deleted, but here's what survived: archaeological evidence. In 1912, Giacomo Boni excavated the Campus Sceleratus. He found remains, not full skeletons, because the acidic soil had dissolved most of the bone, but fragments. Evidence of a stone chamber, evidence of human presence. And here's the part that historians debate: how many women actually died this way? The ancient sources record at least 10 confirmed cases over 700 years, but the sources only recorded cases involving prominent families or political scandals. How many unknown priestesses, women whose names were never written down, were buried in unnamed fields outside the city? We don't know, because the system was designed to erase them. The last recorded live burial happened in 216 BCE, during the Second Punic War. Rome had just lost the Battle of Cannae, the worst military defeat in Roman history. 70,000 soldiers dead in a single day. Hannibal was marching on Rome. The Senate needed a scapegoat. They needed to prove to the gods and to the terrified population that Rome would enforce its sacred contracts at any cost. 2 Vestals, Opimia and Floronia, were accused. The evidence was thin. A soldier had claimed to see them in conversation with foreign envoys. Both denied the charges. Opimia was buried first. Floronia watched. Then it was her turn. Here's the detail that survived in Livy's account. As Floronia descended into the chamber, she turned to the crowd and said, "How can you believe I am unchaste when my presence alone can stop executions?" She was referring to the legal privilege of Vestals, that a condemned criminal who crossed paths with a Vestal on the way to execution could claim automatic pardon. Her words were pointing out the contradiction. If she had divine power to pardon others, how could she simultaneously be corrupt? The crowd was silent. The priest sealed the shaft anyway. The practice officially ended in 394 CE, when the Christian Emperor Theodosius closed the Temple of Vesta. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The logic of the machine never ended. The logic says, when the system is threatened, find the purest symbol and destroy it publicly. When the gods seem angry, sacrifice the most visible innocents. Rome buried women alive to avoid spilling their blood, to technically avoid murder while still achieving death. They wrapped it in religious language. They called it divine justice. But strip away the theology, and what you're looking at is a 700-year administrative protocol for eliminating women who became politically inconvenient under the guise of protecting public morality. The machinery didn't disappear, it just changed its language. History isn't about memorizing dates, it's about understanding the blueprints of cruelty, so we recognize them when they're rebuilt. If you believe the voices they tried to bury deserve to be heard, if you want to keep uncovering the systems that powerful people built to erase inconvenient truths, then subscribe to our channel for more.